Welcome to Sole Source, the podcast specifically for manufacturers and contractors who are tired of leaving money on the table and instead ready to become the only call their clients ever make when they have a new project. I'm Matthew Newberger, and each episode we're going to sit down with actual contractors and manufacturers that have figured out how to escape the bid trap and instead sell completely on value and build the business that they envisioned instead of one that drains them. So if you're ready to actually start filling your backlog with the types of clients you love and want to work with and make your team happy, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Mark, welcome to our first ever podcast on the Sole Source, where people want to get out of the bid trap, earn long-term relationships so they never have to bid again. Thanks for being our first and experimental guest. I want to
My
introduce
pleasure.
everybody.
My pleasure. It's good to see you, Matt.
Well, good to see you too, and thank you for agreeing to do this. That just means you're a pioneer. We'll use that term
Oh, I like that. Perfect.
to describe you. So the purpose of the podcast is always about helping both the people in the industry that go out and get services by putting a bid request proposal on the street that people then bid to. But it's also for the business owners and leaders out there who really want to form closer relationships with clients so they can do better work rather than just lowering their price down to the lowest number. So today we're going to talk about you. And of course, we do a lot of work in the packaging machinery industry. We do a lot of work in the construction services area, but it always comes down to bid. But what I want the world to know about you is first of all, who is Spee-Dee? If you want to give us the 30-second commercial on who you are and what you do, maybe that's a good place for us to start.
That sounds perfect. Well, again, thanks for having me on. And
Sure.
Mark Navin, I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Spee-Dee Packaging Machinery. We are a engineer-to-order packaging machinery company, primarily focusing on building filling equipment for dry products and also building checkwares. I spend most of my time talking to engineering managers and directors within the CPG space about their packaging lines and what's keeping them up at night and how we can help them. A lot of times the packaging line, and specifically the filler, is referred to as the heart of the line. It's where raw materials come in and empty packages come in, and it all comes together at the filler or the heart. So the question I usually ask is your heartbeat nice and strong, or do you need a bypass? So yeah, that's where I live, and happy to unpack that any way you want.
You know, it's interesting because while you have a heartbeat, there's so many different products that go through your equipment, right? So I think we can talk about that. I have some specific questions about that, but I want to start with your personal side, which is this is a business your father started, right? So
Right.
if I'm correct, you guys started, your father bought this business in 1981, 4 employees. I mean, you guys aren't some big conglomerate, nameless, faceless. You're a family business. So
Yeah.
what was it like when you were a kid sitting around the dinner table talking about business? Was your father teaching you about the business, or were
I
you more
wanted
interested
nothing to do with it. I was, he managed the business from the mid '60s until 1981 when he had an opportunity to buy it. The previous owner was moving the headquarters and wanted my dad to move to Pennsylvania, and he had no interest in doing that. And he went across the street to the bank. He knew the banker, and he and a partner got a loan at a really nice low interest rate in 1981.
I'm betting, yeah, that was when the interest rates were really low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they ended up buying the business, and the business name actually it's named after the product line. So there was a Spee-Dee filler, it was a volumetric filler, back then largely used for packaging things like beans and rice and popcorn and mostly food products, a little bit in the chemical industry, and it was known as a Spee-Dee filler. And so they named the company after the filler because there was quite a few, about a few thousand of those out in the field already. And we didn't talk a ton about the business when I was a little kid. He worked a ton, and that's why I wanted nothing to do with it. I mean, I did not want to work as hard as my dad did, and here I am 30 years in doing the same thing. But he really, it was a tough go back then. We had a really tiny little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with my two brothers living in there with my mom and dad and I, and now my two brothers and I are still together, still working in the business
Dave
together.
and Paul.
Dave and Paul, correct. Yep.
Dave and Paul.
So Dave is the president and CEO. Paul runs manufacturing, and I'm on the sales side of the business.
Got it. How did you guys decide who did what? Was it Rochambeau? Rocks, paper,
It,
scissors?
we
Or
feel it had to be something to do with subliminal messages that my dad played when we were kids.
Mark, you should be in sales.
Right. No, we all kind of fell into it. It was kind of bizarre. Dave has always, since he was a little kid, been the technical guy. He was always fixing our bikes and rigging up different things around the house to automate things. And like, he was always the technical guy. So he has a mechanical engineering degree and he was at Spee-Dee for a long time, that he started his own business for a while and then he came back again. So he's been running the company. Paul has been the numbers guy and the brains guy of the business, and he's running the manufacturing. And from a pretty young age, actually, I wanted to get into sales. I remember turning over everything from Matchbox cars to bikes to baseball cards and bartering and trading and selling stuff. And I always thought I wanted to get into technical sales. So we kind of grew up in those roles, I'll say, and it's transformed into a company.
How do you guys does being brothers, like I have a brother too, and there are certain things that just can set us off into an argument really easily. Do you guys all get along, or are there a lot of arguments in the office?
We're all pretty non-confrontational, which can be good and bad.
It could be good.
But for the most part, we get along well, and we all have our individual ends of the business that we deal with.
Yeah.
Paul being in manufacturing, his most common phrase to me are, "You sold what and you want it when?" But other than that, it works out pretty well. Vacations or family gatherings are difficult. Our wives go crazy because we all end up talking about work stuff, and they hear enough of that from us at home. But yeah, we've been at it for a long time, and it's worked out pretty well.
That's good. I know that it can be very rewarding to be in a family business. If everybody gets along and gets energy from it. But
Yeah.
interestingly, you talked a little bit about your backgrounds and your education. You went to St. Olaf's College, which I believe is Minnesota. Is that right? It's
Minnesota,
Minnesota?
correct?
Okay. So you got an econ degree. Is that
Correct.
okay? So you already knew at that point you weren't going to be COO, you weren't going to be the chief engineer. You went economics, which is actually my degree, and I
Really, I
ended
did.
up in sales. So maybe they should call economics, sales 101. I don't
There
know.
you go. Yeah. Well, we instead of econ, we call it ski-con because most of the ski team at St. Olaf College were econ majors. But that was what drew me to that place. They have a good ski program, and I grew up downhill ski racing when I was a kid, and continued to do that in college. And anything business related went through the econ department because it's a small liberal arts school. So that was how I ended up there.
Interesting. And I know you coach skiing today too, don't you?
Correct. Correct. Yep.
Okay. So that really is, so it should be ski con with a sales minor, I think is where we're going to go
Perfect.
with that.
That sounds about right.
I like that. You started at the bottom in the business, am I right? Basically,
Yeah, I had a predecessor, my mentor, actually, a guy named Tim Johnson, who was here for over 20 years. He was our VP of sales. My dad hired Tim just before I came on board, probably about a year before I came on board. And Tim tells the story that my dad said, "Hey, do you want to interview my son? And if you don't like him, don't hire him." And I did interview with Tim, and he and I had, and still to this day, have a good relationship. We get along really well. I learned a lot from him, and we have a very, how do I put this? We're very anti-nepotism. My brothers and I almost have a competition that, who's going to put more hours in, who's going to work harder type thing. It was just the way we were brought up. That's how my dad was. And,
yeah.
you get done with a 12-hour day and he'd always say, "What are you going to do with the second half of your day?" Um, and Tim, Tim and I got along great. And, I started out doing inside sales, putting quotes together for customers. I did that for a few years. Couldn't stand it. It was talking to our independent reps and sitting behind a desk all day, and just wasn't really for me. So I actually ended up resigning, turning in my resignation to Tim and to my dad. and went to lunch with my dad, and by the time lunch was done, I was staying. He asked me what I wanted to do. He just said, you know, what is it, what don't you like and what do you wanna do?" And I said, "I wanna get out of the office, I wanna travel, I wanna go get in front of customers and, you know, work on projects and develop solutions with them and become a sole source provider," right? That's the goal. And, you like how I worked that in?
I love it. There'll be a special bonus for you at the
There you go,
end.
perfect. So, we sat down and talked to Tim, and I ended up moving out of the office and moving into, an office that I created in my apartment at the time, and picked up the phone, and we had a list of larger we had always dealt with smaller companies back then. We were a small
Okay.
company, sold to small companies, but we had PMMI actually do, a study around the types of equipment that we build and who uses them, and it was really eye-opening that it was mostly larger CPGs and their contract manufacturers that used most of our equipment. So, we had to really switch our focus and start focusing a little bit less on the little mom and pop shops. Certainly, some of them are still very good customers of ours, but looking at the more the medium to larger size CPGs, and that was where I went to. I started to, uh, calling people and getting appointments and focusing on the bigger companies and really had a blast doing it. So I did that for a little over 20 years.
So you really enjoyed getting out. You like the human aspect of the business,
Correct.
which is interesting because typically for a more technical background, that's not the thing you like. But getting out in front of the customers is what you enjoyed. I'm kind of curious. Um, Starting at the bottom and moving up into this role was really about getting in front of people, which is where you're going back to now,
Right.
right? So
Yep.
we'll get into more on the business in a second, but you recently decided to make the change from having a pretty lofty title, which was you ran all of sales, VP of sales, to now you're going back into that almost what you wanted to do before you left Spee-Dee. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, what motivated that move?
I missed what I was doing. I really enjoyed the back then my title was strategic account manager, and that was the goal was to really just develop those long-term relationships with our bigger customers. And when Tim retired, it felt like my natural next step to just jump into his role as VP of sales and run the group. And I said I give it 5 years. 'Cause I really liked what I was doing, but I said, "This is the next step. Gotta take the next step and see what it's like," and I gave it 5 years, and it's been 5, and I wanna go back to what I was doing before. You know, I enjoy the team. I really enjoy the mentorship, and I enjoy building the team, and I enjoy working with the team, but I really feel like the best use of my I don't know, my talents and really what I enjoy doing is being in front of the customers and working on specific projects and trying to see those come to fruition. That's what I really love. So when any of our salespeople for the last 5 years, when they were going into a bigger customer or had a bigger project to come out, I was like, "Come on, what are we going? What come with?" And
I'm
you
coming,
know,
right?
get
You're
out of the
bringing me.
office, right? So yeah, I much more enjoy that part of the business than the management side. Quite honestly, I really like that.
They're
So
two very
hired a,
different.
hired a person to fill my role, and I'm jumping back into the field.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for that because I think a lot of people, from an ego standpoint, can't get past the title. They're not willing to relinquish the title, but they don't necessarily love the work. So the business stalls as a result. And you've really gone back to what you love doing. And it's kind of interesting because you've been at Speedy now, what, 3 years? 3 years, 30 years. Let's add a
Yeah.
zero to that.
Yeah.
What would you say to a young person? Because I think a lot of times when people go to work for a company, they they have their parents and their friends and their spouses in their ear saying, you got to move every couple of years if you want to get ahead, right? And instead, really, you've found a way to navigate over 30 years. You thought about leaving your company very early on. What would be your advice to a young person who's coming into a company like a Speedy or any other company for that matter when it comes to how they should navigate their career? Like you've made some pretty smart moves. Some of that might have been motivated by family.
Yeah, certainly having the family business has been a big leg up in that, but I did, was able to start at the bottom and really at the time I hated it. When my first, I don't know, it was probably 3 to 4 weeks, I was in the back in the shop assembling machines with a guy named Ben. Old Ben was an assembler for my dad for years, and I remember him telling me that I had to slow down because I was making him look bad. Um, and
I've heard that one before.
but literally putting the machines together, assembling them, spending time in the lab, figuring out how products work. The best advice I can give is you need to be at a company long enough to build credibility that can translate into trust. I think that
I like that.
that's incredibly important because, I can draw from experience and stories and occurrences over the career of 30 years, and there's so many things. A new project crops up, and you can immediately go back to, could be last year, could be 20 years ago. Here's how we solved this problem, and here are the things that we encountered, and here's what you should really be looking for, looking out for. And that immediately breaks down barriers, and people will start to trust you because you've lived it. If you're jumping jobs every year or 2 years, you never get that kind of experience to draw on. And I think that that's lost today.
So, if we were to look at that sort of as the benefits of loyalty over mobility, right? Changing every year with the benefits of, there's probably benefits to both, but the benefits I'm hearing you say have a lot more to do with the depth of learning you have, which ultimately makes you more valuable as opposed to jumping jobs every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So that's a great story. So I got to ask just one more question on the personal side, which is, your dad got into this business. You were never wanting to be a part of the business. Then you rose up through the ranks. You're 30 years. You get your three brothers. You all work together. You all get along. Thanksgiving is all about business, right? What was the message or the most important lesson you learned from your father? Because you guys really, I have a lot of respect for businesses that really are ground up just a few people and then turned it into a meaningful enterprise, which you guys have done. What was the lesson that really stuck with you from your father?
He had a saying, and it was, "You can't use the runway behind you." He was a private pilot. He liked airplanes his whole life. And that one always sticks with me. In fact, after he passed away, we made keychains with that saying on it.
Mm.
And it really stuck with me. You got to keep looking forward, you know? Don't live in your mistakes. Don't live in, what happened yesterday. You got to be in the present and looking for what's next. And we've been really fortunate to have some, he'd call them turns in the road, capitalizing on a new technology or capitalizing on a certain market that is taking off. And we've been really fortunate looking forward to those turns in the road and figuring out how to run with them or improve upon them. And yeah, you can't use the runway behind you. That was his best saying. He had a lot of them though.
It's funny. My father, I had the sayings and they come out at the appropriate times. They're like recordings that you just keep playing over. Can you remember a specific example of where he used that on with you?
Oh
Where you brought
yeah.
up a
I used
problem?
to I used to beat myself up if we lost an order or lost a project. It would really eat at me, and I'd be I wouldn't bounce back as quickly as I do today. And so that was his line. Hey, you can't go backwards. It's done, right?
Nothing you can do about the past,
Figure
right?
out
It's
what your next order is. Let's go.
right. Let's get the next one. There's it,
Yep.
and it's a richer example of some will, some won't. So what next? Which is a common phrase used when you are working on an opportunity that doesn't actually come to fruition. So it's sort of the how do we quickly get the afterburn, like where we
Yep.
ruminate
Yep.
and go forward. So that's great fatherly advice. I'd like to kind of switch here. You're deeply involved in PMMI, so am I, but in very different capacities. You as a member and me as a partner. You actually are on the board of PMMI. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that role entails?
Yeah. I'm a new board member. I was elected to the board in January of this year, so it's pretty fresh. I've only done a couple meetings so far and went through the orientation, but it's I've been involved with the business a long time. Tim Johnson, my mentor, he was on the board. My brother Dave spent some time on the board, and now I'm on the board. So Spee-Dee's always had a long history of being very, very involved with the industry, and the reason for that is the trade group is just an amazing organization. The amount of collaboration, the amount of OEM interaction that we have, and more important than anything, the friendships that you build over the years within this group are just awesome. And um, to become a trusted advisor, as we always like to say, it's not just helping somebody, a customer out or a client out with what you can do, but connecting them with somebody that can help a problem that I can't solve. And that's where I think PMMI has done just a great job of getting people together to network and to build relationships, because we can all help each other out that way. And it's been a lot of fun. And the board is just kind of the next level of that.
Yeah, and it really does create a need for cooperation and integration among a lot of different providers and different types of providers in order to
Right.
pull off something. So that makes sense. You were at a meeting called Top to Top, and I'm curious if you could explain that to the people that might be watching this, what that is, what is it for, and then what were some of the takeaways from that Top to Top meeting that you had?
So Top to Top is a meeting of CPG companies and the PMOI staff and the board of directors. And it's really an event to figure out where's the industry going, what's missing, how do we improve relationships between OEM providers and packaging and processing machinery providers and the CPG customers.
Hmm.
And it's an awesome event. It was my first one, and I'd heard a lot of good things about it, and it really lived up to its name. I think coming out of it, the main theme is really on relationships, figuring out a means of being less transactional and really understanding both ways, our biggest customers, where we're headed and where we're planning to go, and what their plans are long term, to really become, you know, resources for each other. And it was a really it was nice to hear. Quite honestly,
What
it
was
was
a
real.
nice give an example for somebody that may not be in that meeting, because that's a pretty exclusive meeting. Was there a certain aha you heard from your customer or your customer base that was interesting to you, and maybe something you
Yeah.
have to put thought behind?
One of the things that stood out, it was something that we're already doing with a few customers, not enough, but with a few. And it was pointed out, we do a lot of roundtable discussions, and there's several panels that people sit on, and there's questions asked, and the audience then can also use the device to vote on things that the board, the panelists are talking about. A lot of great feedback and data that comes out of it. PMI does a great job with that. But the one item that stands out is one of my biggest customers was on a panel. It was brought up by the moderator that not only does the CPG need to tell us what they're looking for or how to, improve our equipment, but we've got to tell them how to improve their situation or their efficiencies or how to run the machine better. Or it's got to be a two-way street, right? So my friend and customer who was on the stage looked at me. I was sitting in the front row, and he says, "Mark, we do that, right? You give us." I said, "Yeah, we do." So that was really cool to hear. It's just something that I knew we were doing, but it was something that we've always just tried to do. But it was called out in that forum, which was really a cool situation for me. And I think it's a good point that we've got to be very transparent both ways.
You do, and I think one of the things that's interesting that we're big advocates for in the work that we do is making sure that sales teams, one of the vectors to know if you've done everything you can to win that deal is answering the question through your due diligence, investigations, through your questions. Did you teach your buyer anything?
Mm,
In other words, not did you present your equipment and your specs and your speeds and
yeah.
all those, but did the client actually learn something that was important so that they could make better decisions based on their interaction with you? And that's
Right.
kind of what this question seems like. So I'm kind of curious, based on leaving that and just in general, you being in the business for 30 years, where do you see things in the next 3 to 5 years? How is the packaging world going to change?
One of the things that was brought up during that meeting, which I found was really interesting, is standardization. So there's still a high level of standards out there. A lot of the larger CPGs have these massive URS documents that they put together that, calls out the wire colors they want to use and the type of labeling on every wire in the panel they want to use. And here's the components that they'll only accept in the machine. And really, really prescribing exactly what the machine has to be. And if you don't fit that or you aren't able to meet that, you either may not be able to bid or you're not going to get the project because you can't say yes to everything on their palette, so to speak. What was interesting is that's starting to get broken down a little bit in the guise of improving lead times and improving price. So when we do a lot of that, we do a lot of customization for our larger CPGs, and we're happy to do it, but it comes at a price, right? And so I heard from several people that they were larger CPGs. Some of them are willing to take more of our standards in order to get a better lead time at a better price. And so I'm sure that
Answer.
I think that's gonna end up somewhere in between. There's gonna be some give and take there. It used to be very much, "This is the way we want it, and this is what we're gonna do because it's standard, and we've got spare parts for all this stuff," and there's still a lot of validity to that, but I think that that wall is starting to get broken down where people are starting to accept more of what we do as a standard, and, we put a lot of effort into why we make certain components our standard because we like them and they work well. And so I think we're starting to listen to that and improve the price and lead time because of it.
I like that. And why I like that is because one of the things that we see coming in the next 3 to 5 years is with the adoption of AI in the bid request process from buyers, right? Especially from the larger corporations. They're doing a lot more of that. The concern in that is that they may be making the best possible decisions they can make based on the information they have, but they may not have all the information. In other words, they may think what they're doing is driving down costs, but in fact, it's going to increase costs, lead time, things like that. So if they're not actually leaving the door open for a conversation with a manufacturer like yourself, they're they're oftentimes not looking at the full picture.
Right.
So I'll use a construction example to contrast this. When an electrician is looking at drawings and asked to bid off of the drawings, they'll bid based on what the drawings say, knowing that the drawings are wrong.
Hmm.
And then what results is something called a change order.
Lots and lots of change orders.
And that's where the profit is. So you can win the bid based on bidding the way the bid is being requested, but it doesn't actually work. So I think what's going to happen the next 3 to 5 years is we're actually going to see some companies lean into this more arm's length discussion, and it's actually going to cost them in ways they hadn't anticipated. I think others
Yeah.
will move in a different direction. I think the question is who do you decide to do business with? Because
Yeah.
ultimately it can be reputation damaging if you go down the wrong road.
Yeah. We,
Uh,
we actually just had it's a very fair point, and there are a lot of companies. We just had a bid request come across that was a reverse auction, and it's like it's a race to the bottom. You know, it's only online. You can't talk about, what makes you different, what makes you better, and then you decide if you want to keep racing, reducing the price to win this bid. And we just say we're not doing it. We turn it down. Don't even enter the bid process because there's just no way in my mind to win it and still be successful.
what would be
And
your message?
either
I think
party.
this is a common tension between buyers and sellers in this industry. W- what does a buyer need to understand? Like if you could just sit with a buyer and have an honest conversation about when you do that, here's what you do to our business. If we decide to compete, what
Right.
advice would you give them on a better way, a better outcome, or a better? Uh, uh,
Yeah, I mean, If you think about it, you're likely, if you know it's a reverse auction, you're going to start out way higher than what you normally would in hopes of not letting the bottom fall out, right? So number one, you're starting off at a bad spot. I think the worst part about it is there's that what you talked about a minute ago of did the customer learn anything from talking to you? There is no learning, there's no teaching, there's no asking questions, there's no they come up with a package that they want, a solution that they think they want, and they put it out there for bid, right? Well, there might be a whole different way to do it that's way more efficient, way faster, maybe less expensive, and certainly a total cost of ownership is likely gonna be less if we can really have a conversation about what their pain is. They're giving up on all that, and I get it. People don't necessarily like to sit down with a salesperson all the time, and they may think it's gonna be just transactional, and they think this is a better way to go, and they're leaving a lot on the table by doing that.
Yeah, that's true. And shameless plug is you guys have all been trained on the way not to be the typical salesperson. So that's not how you would show up. No, not to
Exactly.
mention the fact that you grew up from 4 years old, seeing this whole business evolve. So that probably wouldn't be the case because you're looking at the longer term, the decade, not
Right.
the quarter.
Right.
Um, I really think this is an important point to make to buyers. So if you became a buyer tomorrow, you were on the other side of the table, you were with some big company. I won't name names just because I don't want to single any company out. How would you go about working with companies like yours?
Hmm, it's an interesting one. I think it's it's asking poignant questions, not necessarily about what the company can do for them or what the product is. It's also what's behind that, why do they do things a certain way? And I think understanding, if I go to, I know you're passionate about the whole sales process and building businesses, right?
Hmm.
And, you know, asking you about why you're passionate about it. Why do you
Mm,
want to do it? Those sorts of things I think are really impactful to figuring out whether it is going to be a transactional relationship or whether it is going to be something where you're gonna find a resource. I think that's the key is I'm looking not just for to buy a piece of equipment, I'm looking for a resource that's gonna help me grow my business and make more money.
that makes a lot of sense. So getting to know the individuals, and you may not like every salesperson, but you'll probably find some that will help you understand what's coming down the road. But it sounds like what you're saying in essence is invest in getting relationships in the market that you can trust and you can go to with what you're thinking before you just put bids out on the street for anyone to respond to.
Correct.
This is the hard question, right? I asked this. If you've seen me, you asked this question once, you've probably seen it a few times. What makes Let's talk about Spee-Dee specifically for a second. What makes you guys different? Who should be coming to you and why? So what makes and again, I won't mention competitors here, but
Mhm.
it's more about what makes you special. And for the people that are watching this, it would be interesting to see how you position that.
Yeah. Um, the first thing is, and a lot of people say this, but, the listening piece. Um, our best solutions that we've come up with have always come from a customer's need.
Okay.
So if I'll start, maybe I'll answer this the best way with a really short story. Um, one of our biggest accounts still to this day, over 20 years, we've been working with this big CPG. We had only sold them a couple really small pieces of equipment back in 1999, roughly. And they told us they were gonna come visit us, and they're gonna go visit 2 of our biggest competitors, and we were the smallest player at that time,
Hmm.
and it was a big project for us, probably one of the biggest we had done at the time, and the customer we ended up winning the project, and after the factory acceptance test, I asked the customer why they ended up going with Spee-Dee, and they said it was we sat down as a group after we visited everybody, and, it came down to something really simple, that we went to the other two folks and they started talking about what they could offer. And when they came into Spee-Dee's doors, we all sat down at a table and everybody at the Spee-Dee side pulled out a notebook and we started asking questions. And
And
that was,
nobody else did that.
and nobody else did that. And so, that gets back to the why we're doing what we're doing. And it's because everybody here seems to really love solving problems and helping people. And I think that that's what really sets us apart. And we do a lot of customization of our machines in order
Mhm.
to solve those problems, but it's all because of a need, because there's some problem at the heart of their packaging line that they're trying to solve. And we love digging into that stuff and unpacking it and figuring out a solution.
So if they're willing to share, you're willing to go down that road and be a little bit more customized. And that kind of leads me to something that I've learned about you, which is you've kind of decided to stay in your lane, right? So
Mhm.
you're not necessarily I'm looking at here, you're not doing anything full line integration, right? You guys really are what I call a best in class filler checkware. And talk about why that's a strength and not a limitation.
We've chosen deliberately to grow through innovation and not by acquisition or expansion. And I think it's really worked well for us because we do lose some projects once in a while when somebody says, "Hey, Speedy, we need you to provide, from an unscrambling system all the way through a capping, labeling, and palletizing, and
Right.
I simply say, sorry, we're really good at this section, and that's where we want to live. Now, lots of great integrator friends out there that we work with all the time that we can work together with, and you could still buy the machines that we are specialized in directly from me, or you can buy it through our integrator friend. Happy to do it that way, but we're not we're not experts in that whole line integration, nor do we really want to be. And I think that people really understand that. And when you can answer a question like that by turning down what could be a massive project, a very big financial potential for gain for us by saying, you just want to specialize here. I think people really see that as, wow, that's admirable and they must be really good at that.
Right. And I think that's it. You end up doing a better job because you're focused as opposed to sort of doing a good job across several different disciplines. So I like
Right.
that. So that kind of begs the question, talk about maybe your ideal project, your ideal customer. And I have to say, I'm so curious as how you guys got into the cannabis market because that's a more recent thing. At some point, you were
Yeah.
like, cannabis gummies, we're gonna, we're doing it, and
Right.
and we're very familiar with the industry. But what is that ideal project? What is that ideal customer, and how do they find you?
Hmm. Let's see. Ideal customer has been medium to large CPGs that or contract manufacturers especially
Hmm.
that need flexibility, and I think the primary one is quick changeovers. Now, everybody says they need a quick changeover, but if you go into, let's say, the nutraceutical industry or the spice industry or somebody that's going to run 350 different SKUs through the same filler, right? That's an
Yep.
ideal customer for us because we've designed things into the machine that were, by the way, a customer's idea. Their name, one of the customers we had for one of our parts of our machine that we patented, their name is on the patent with ours because
Huh.
it came right out of the traditional bar napkin sketch, and I'm not kidding. And we put their name on it with ours, and it's on every machine we build now, or almost every machine we build. But it really was around making the machine way faster to change over and clean. And it's really been a big win for us. So, I think that those are the ideal customers for us. And then how do they find us? I think oddly enough, it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of our connections within the industry. So 30 plus years of being in PMMI and building relationships and having a lot of OEM partners that do what I do, where they recommend people that they know are really good at something and they know that they're the experts. I think that's been probably the biggest thing is that word of mouth and reference.
That makes sense. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, and I have these conversations too. I'll get the phone call and someone I'll immediately know just based on the way the conversation feels. Is this somebody that's there's already some level of trust or somebody that's just shopping? I'm just curious, what does the conversation feel like when somebody already trusts you versus when they're just looking for a number?
Those those are always fun. When somebody trusts you, a lot of times the conversations, number one, they don't start out with the project, right? Whether there's history there or not, usually it's learning a little bit, or even if they don't trust you yet, but they're looking for somebody that they can trust,
Hmm.
then it's a little bit more about your background, your history, your experience, a little bit more about what you asked about the company, the history. And those are really telltale signs, I think, of somebody that's looking for a partner and a resource. Whereas somebody that's just kicking the tires and looking for a price starts immediately with the facts, the here's what we need to do, here's when we need it, and those are all good things, and we certainly still want to talk to those people, but somehow we want to try to change the conversation there into how to become a resource for them, not just give them a price and send them on their merry way.
Yeah, and I would summarize that as one's very tactical and the other one's very strategic. And what I mean by that is tactical is help me solve a problem I've already decided how I want to solve versus let me tell you my goal and you share with me how I might solve that problem. Right? Let
Yeah,
me get to know you and understand you and how you can help me. But I'm going to start with the bigger picture, what I'm trying to accomplish, not
right,
the piece of equipment that I'm trying to buy. So that makes
exactly.
sense. So in wrapping up, a couple of questions. All the customers that you serve and you think about them, and I know you care about the people that you work with and the people that you serve. We've talked about some of the machines that have been in place for multiple decades, right?
Right.
What should they be focused on? These people that you care about and you serve all the time, for them to win in the next 3 to 5 years, right? As opposed to focusing on what they need to do today, right? Today we can look at what's going on in the world and say this is what we need to do today. But what do you think your customers need to be focused on in the next 3 to 5 years for them to win? What do they need to look at in terms of measurement? What do they need to look at in terms of their equipment? What do they need to look at in terms of how they build a relationship with you? What are the challenges you think they're going to be facing in the future?
One of the biggest ones it's not anything necessarily new, but it's accelerating, and that's obsolescence.
Okay.
And we manufacture a lot of the mechanical parts of our machines here. We're vertically integrated that way, but from a electronics and control standpoint, that's all purchased products. And lately, not every controls and electronic supplier, but a lot of them, things are going obsolete more quickly. And if an OEM, or I'm sorry, if a CPG gets out ahead of that, I think it's going to make them win in the long run. We've done some projects recently with some of our bigger customers that we're going in and doing an audit of their systems. We've got all the serial numbers, all the line numbers of all the machines that they have. And
Mhm.
for a very moderate price tag, we can just go in and do an audit. We don't necessarily have to go to the plant unless things have been upgraded and changed on their own. But just going through and looking at what's obsolete within their system, what would be a long lead time or a really painful part that if it were to fail, that they got to get out ahead of it and either have spares on hand or more uh, applicable is for us to go in and do a controls upgrade. A lot of customers or a lot of companies in my shoes will say, we got to replace that machine. And we say, the mechanical parts of it, they're really simple. We make very simple equipment. So if those things are still running and they're still working and they're well maintained, let's just go in and we take the same exact panel size. We leave the box in place. We build up a whole new back panel here. We get it all tested out. And within a shift, we go in and pop the old one out, pop the new one in, re-terminate things, and away we go. And it gives them a brand new life of that older machine. And that's been really successful. And I think people getting out ahead of that obsolescence curve is going to be key.
So that's what you're really working on right now.
Yeah, that's one of the things. We'd rather sell a brand new machine to somebody, that's, that'd be ideal. But we certainly it's a focus of trying to keep things running out in the field and trying to keep a revenue stream coming in here while still helping out our customer.
Right. And because the equipment's reliable, that's
Right.
and you've got so much equipment out there in the world that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What are the industries that you're going to be making a push into in the next 3 to 5 years? A larger push from where you are today.
Oh, let's see. I think, with the trends, with proteins, like, everybody wants more protein these days, right? So that's
Right.
been a big push. We've always done a lot in protein powders and things, but there's other forms of protein that are coming onto the shelves nowadays that are really exciting, and I think that that's an area that one of those, turns in the road that I mentioned earlier that we're trying to capitalize on and going after that. And then, people are eating healthier nowadays, and so try to get into industries that are following those sorts of trends. You can't put all your eggs into a basket where, it's a shrinking industry. And so we're
Right.
trying to figure out, just watching the way that people, consumers are buying products now. I mean, most of what we do is in the food industry. So,
But this
just
is nutraceuticals.
nutraceutical stuff, we do a lot in gummy vitamins. That's been a big one. Now that we hit a really big curve there in during COVID and right after COVID, where everybody was at home and everybody was taking vitamins. But the spice industry is the same thing there as
Just think if you
COVID.
were an alcohol at that same period of
I
time.
know, exactly. Everybody opened up their spice cabinet at the same time. Everyone in the world opened it up the same couple of weeks and realized their spices were all 40 years old and they had to buy new stuff.
Right. Oh my
So that
goodness.
drove some
We can't
sales
make
there.
our
But yeah,
yeah.
you're trying to do things that are, build machinery for what consumers are buying more of these days.
Makes sense. So last question, and that is if one of the things the industry needs, and a lot of industries needs this, but we need young people coming into the industry and becoming the next leaders in the industry and on both sides of the table. And I only mean that to say the CPGs are going to need people to take over, and they're going to need, and on your side, there'll be the next generation of people coming up in the business at some point. What are your advice to people thinking about getting into the industry? What would be something for these folks that are contemplating this? Maybe it's a family business they're going to join. Maybe
Mhm.
it's a direction they want to take naturally. But what would be your advice for people coming into the industry? What do you think they need to learn, do, or consider?
It goes back to what we talked about earlier is getting experience. I mean, nothing can replace walking the packaging line floor at a customer site, whether they're a customer or not, whether you're somebody, a prospect you're trying to get into, or whether you've got 40 machines in the line. Getting out, talking to people that use the equipment on a day-to-day basis, they're your best form of feedback, right? They've been living with it for the last 10, 15, 20 years and always have ideas on how to make it better. Um, but, having a young person get on the factory floor, both at the company they're working at, like if they were working at Spee-Dee, getting out the factory floor, learning how machines go together, learning applications, learning just spending time in the lab, and then also that same person spending time at our customers' factories and asking questions and learning, being a sponge. Because those are the sorts of things that you can translate into conversations and into applications as they come around and when you're talking to somebody, and that's where you could be a resource for somebody. That's why I keep coming back to that, but being a resource is what customers will come back to you for. That's what that they'll pick up the fence instead of going and searching on AI, they can call me or call you and actually have a conversation, learn something, right? So being a resource for them. And that's where you get to be that sole source provider is when you can be that strong of a resource for somebody. It's a challenge, but we have to figure out how to be better than AI. And I think that's the way to do it.
Well, I think there's something that AI tends to generalize what it understands from whatever it can access. And to your point, getting in front of a person who's actually operating a machine gives you a very specific data point. And so it kind of leads me I'll make this the last question. If somebody was thinking about getting into the industry and they saw, hey, here's Speedy, I'm in town, I'm going to graduate from college or I'm in high school. I'm just kind of curious. Would you take a phone call from that person? They said, "Hey, I'd be interested in just coming in and learning what you guys do or talking to you
Yeah,
and seeing if this is something I might want to pursue in the future." Would they be able
absolutely.
to call you and get a meeting?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a phone call. And if they're in
Yeah.
town, sure. I mean, it's I'm passionate about it. It's fun. It's my family business. It's been my life for 30 years, and I love talking about it. So, absolutely. I mean, it's a blast to we actually bring local schools through. We'll get a call. My son's high school came through last year. We've got some grade schools that come through once in a while, and we give them a tour of the building, and spend some time in the lab. Usually we set up a machine with some candy being dispensed from it and let them fill a little cup of candy they can take with them, and do a little presentation and get them excited about, automation and about the trades and, show them, walking by the welding area and the polishing area and the machine shop and their eyes, their eyes kind of light up. They're like, wow, people really do this kind of thing. So it's fun.
What I think is interesting is tech tends to grab, or AI right now is grabbing the headlines, but actually the packaging machinery business is a very entrepreneurial, almost
Yeah.
just out of the headlines business. I don't think people realize how much opportunity is there. So I think what you're explaining and them being able to see that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you for taking all the time with us today on the interview. Is there any other message you want the world to know about you and Spee-Dee before we wrap up?
Oh, let's see. I can carry on a conversation in mostly lines from 80s comedy movies. We'll leave it at that.
Any movies that people should prepare if they're calling you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Caddyshack, Stripes, Strange Brew, Fletch, those are all my favorites. So
Perfect. All right,
Princess Bride, that's one of the best.
if all right, if somebody wants to impress you, they've got to get some movie quotes from that movie, and they can start that off with their call.
Perfect.
Perfect, Mark. Well, thank you for being our inaugural. I don't even know if I said that right. Inaugural guest on the podcast. It means a lot. You've been a good friend, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you guys head in the future. Thanks for
My
joining
pleasure,
us.
Mark. Thanks for everything. Take care.